The average small business does not sell. When a buyer comes along and looks behind the facade, this is what they frequently see. There are a few reasons why a buyer feels that they are looking at an empty shell. We had one person who went absolutely white when they discovered, but you also need to be able to prove those things. And that comes with, and quite frankly, the business owner, they still have to run their business. We have genuinely seen businesses tank because I have seen some business owners walk away with a fraction of what was originally negotiated. Sale ready doesn't mean selling now. I worked with one business owner who he just went back on the tools. That's what he loved doing. Selling a business really is like selling a house, except you have far less protection. So again, for us, protecting those business owners that have not done this before, they've got one shot at a big equity event for their retirement. We want to help them to get it right. Yes. So how to sell your business without the due diligence disaster. So this is part of our Sale or Scale series. So we're running a few masterclasses on different elements of preparing a business for sale or for scale. And we've called it Sale or Scale because normally the same things that you need to do to prepare a business for sale is exactly what you would probably want to do to be able to scale it. And we wanted to, so that the main purpose of this Sale or Scale series is to protect the business owners thinking about selling. And that's partly because we have worked with buyers, a whole different range of buyers, which Alex can attest to, that some were more ethical than others. Let's just leave it at that. So we've seen a lot. So what we are going to go through today is a quick overview of the M&A process, why you should consider due diligence way before you are thinking about selling. In fact, we're saying that preparing for sale doesn't mean that you are actually going to sell. So sometimes people change their mind once they've got a business running really, really well. We're going to have a bit of a deeper dive into due diligence because we feel that a lot of business owners have no idea what is barreling down the road at them when it comes to the sale process. Obviously, always an option to work with us. We give a brief overview of what our services are, a chance to ask the questions, and the due diligence download with a short guide and the data room framework. And we have this section, chance to ask questions, because that won't be in the recording. So you can get a little bit more detailed in some of your questions if you like in that section, because we will cut that bit out. So very briefly, who is Good Biz? Between us in our team, we've got a background in accounting. We've got a fully qualified accountant working with us. We have expertise in IT and systems, and we have expertise in business processes. Me personally, I'm a certified business coach, certified in lean manufacturing, in Six Sigma, systems thinking, and I have and E-Myth, and I have a penchant for the Entrepreneur's Operating System, which I think is just a beautiful follow-on from the E-Myth concepts. We have valued hundreds of founder-led businesses, and if I was actually working it out that going through some of the years, it's probably getting into the thousands now, where we've gone through the valuations mainly for buyers, which is why we think it puts us in the unique seat of helping sellers to understand how they can leverage the buyer's perspective and leverage what they've already got in the business. We have ran full due diligence processes, and given that a full due diligence can be months and months and months of work, we've done a full due diligence on dozens of businesses. We've probably started a due diligence process on getting up for hundreds, because it doesn't always complete. And we've worked with M&A buyers for nearly a decade. It's just getting up to a decade almost, which means that we have seen almost every trick in the book that buyers will use, and every reason why a business owner's valuation can get very quickly eroded. So like I said before, one of our core goals is to avoid that valuation erosion during the process, of which there is the financial side, and then there's also the psychological side of how a business owner can get worn down through all of this. So Construction Colin, he is based on a very specific person that we have changed his name, we have changed the photograph. That is not him in person, but we know who we're talking about. We were doing due diligence. We were working with a buyer. We were looking at having a minority shareholding in this business at the same time. So we had a vested interest in doing the full due diligence on this company. Construction company, they were doing roughly 5 million in turnover, looking to increase that to about 6.5, 7 in that current financial year. And when we started working on the due diligence, he was working with a broker. The broker was supposed to be helping him to tidy up the business, and it took weeks for the simplest questions to be answered. And their finances, and I know, Craig, you'll attest to this, that numbers can be, if they're in a mess, it's really problematic. And I think I saw a post just recently where you said some companies are like 6 months before they get live figures. That was this company. They would gather all their information from a bookkeeping package and give it to the accountant after 3 months. The accountant then took 3 months to form management accounts, and then it came back to the business owner, who didn't then look at it again ever. And sitting on the buyer's side of the table, this was just, we had no visibility of the business. So we were struggling to get any information out of this gentleman. No cash flow forecast. No, there was just nothing of any strategic value on the due diligence, and their finances were not in the best condition either. What this guy ended up with was a business that was starting to spiral out of control. We did uncover certain things which he was not really aware of because of the lack of clarity. But there was also the fact that he was spending so long in trying to get some of the information to us to enable us to carry through or fulfill the share purchase agreement, that he took his eye off the ball. And this is what we are trying to help potential sellers to avoid. So, and I know that this will be very familiar to people that is watching this. There will be some people that will have never come across what an actual sales process is. So very briefly, high-level process. There is an initial inquiry that wants to look at some information. There is usually a letter of intent or heads of terms, depending on which side of the pond you are looking at your business from. There tends to be more information requested prior to the share purchase agreement, the SPA, which is kind of kicks off the due diligence process to then allow the negotiation to happen, which in itself can take quite a bit of time. And then you've got the due diligence itself, which tends to be the longest part because most people haven't prepared for it. And we're going to dive into that shortly. Once that is completed and everybody is happy, you then go through the actual share purchase agreement, and there is a little bit of due diligence stroke handover after the share purchase agreement has been signed and sealed. So What normally happens is someone's found a buyer. You don't know what is going to happen next. This isn't, as you may have gathered, this isn't the way I recommend to try and sell a business, but this is what normally happens. They find a buyer and then go, now what? However, we go through, we've got the maximum value. So if you have seen any of our valuation videos or masterclass, you will have understood what your normal valuation is, the different valuations that different types of buyers will offer you, and how you can leverage that to, in some cases, double the valuation. I'm not going to go into that in this morning, because that is a different masterclass. And you potentially got an offer on the table. What you will want to start thinking about is what the buyers are thinking, because the bottom line is they will want to reduce their risk and reduce the price, both of which is to their benefit. So one of these things, again, part of one of our other masterclasses, is understanding the different buyers, because different buyers will have different pricing strategies and different acquisition strategies. And I do recommend that sellers take a step back and think about, well, why are you selling? Or at least why are you thinking about selling? How do you want your exit to look? And what do you want the end result to be like? Because different buyers will fill in different holes for you. So it's really worth thinking just that step back to think about what you want that end result to be. And we have found that sometimes when clients have worked with us and they've tidied up their business, their pain points have disappeared, and they would actually like to go for a bit more before they think about selling or retiring. So for us, when we talk about a business freedom framework, it's about giving that seller or the business owner that choice, that freedom to think about, okay, do I want to exit? And if I want to exit, on what terms? So again, that's another masterclass again on the freedom of choice when you've got that business set up in a way that you can step back. So yeah, business, we've got buyer types, personas, we've got the valuation, and we've got the concept behind the business freedom framework in other classes. What we are looking at the moment is the appearance of your business when you are presenting it to a potential buyer. And the big thing about the due diligence, you'll potentially hear the term the data room, which some people think is, okay, that's Sherlock Holmes' big data room that he has in his what does he call it, in the mind palace or something. Other people think it's some complicated system that gets all set up, that it's some kind of complicated setup. Basically, it's just a highly structured folder system with a registry with key components. So it's nothing complicated. If someone talks to you about the data room, that's all it is: highly structured folder system with all the key documents and background information and examples of what your business is like in all the different areas. So a quick nod to the average small business does not sell. And this is backed up. So we've done a bit of research both in the UK and the US, and the 85% of SMEs that don't sell is quite conservative. Some numbers have gone up as high as 92%. And I thought this was really important to bring this statistic in, because frequently a business owner will come to the table completely unprepared. They will go to a broker, and even the best brokers, of which there are a huge variety, there's really good brokers and there's not so good brokers. Even the best brokers are going to struggle to sell some of these businesses because they're just not prepared. And when you are looking at these kind of statistics, it kind of makes you think, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I have the best chance possible of A, selling my business in the first place, as well as B, getting the maximum valuation that I can out of it. That statistic says to me it's a buyer's market. And it's not because it's not because the number of businesses that are up for sale. It's because the state of the average business that is up for sale. So you really need a clean and tidy business. So if you think about it like selling a house, if you sell a house and there's rubbish in the garden and the weeds are overgrown and the wallpaper's falling off the wall and the light switches are brown and a bit burnt, that's going to put a lot of buyers off. It's the same with the business. If this business isn't clean and tidy, you're going to struggle. Which brings me in mind of London's fake houses. I don't know if anyone's come across this. So London's fake houses, this particular one is one of the more famous ones in Linster Gardens. And I liken this a little bit to business for a few different reasons, but frequently a business owner will just go to a broker. Maybe I haven't even researched the type of broker that they're going to, and a broker will create a lovely IM information memorandum that looks wonderful on a website, looks a great opportunity. But when a buyer comes along and looks behind the facade, this is what they frequently see. There are a few reasons why a buyer feels that they are looking at an empty shell. Frequently, owner dependency. If the owner is the beating heart of that company and holds everything together and they're just about to walk out, the best employee of that business, the business is highly likely going to just collapse without their specialist knowledge, without their ability to hold everything together. Another reason, financial clarity. The number of businesses we come across where they do not have full financial clarity, the finance in their eyes is something that they just pass off to the accountant instead of really understanding the numbers and understanding what it's telling them, the trends, etc. When I talk to buyers, that is their number one complaint, is lack of financial clarity. And without it, your due diligence process just gets prolonged by weeks, if not months. Unrealistic expectations. If a business is owner dependent, if it doesn't have proper financial clarity, you are potentially plucking a nice plump sum out of the air and saying that's what I think my business is worth. And it frequently comes about because they're looking at their revenue, because they don't have the financial clarity. So a buyer will come along and try and instill some financial clarity and look at the valuation that those numbers is telling them, the dependency that it's telling them, and will frequently say, no, we can't pay you for that amount of money that you're after. So if you've already got this a certain level in your mind, what your business is worth, and a buyer is coming in a lot below that, you're never going to meet. So working on your numbers and your business beforehand to really understand what a buyer is looking for can really help. And the other thing is systems. When I say systems, I mean the people and the processes, and all four of these feed into each other. Without that management and the processes, the business is very owner dependent. For an owner to be able to step back and sell a business as an asset, you've got to have all these other things in place, that financial clarity, the management, the people. So that's tends to be the main reasons why a buyer can look under the bonnet of your business and just very quietly back away. So due diligence, what is it? There's a legal definition and then there is the business definition. So we're really just concentrating on the business definition. And it's pretty much a buyer doing their due diligence is making sure that there are no skeletons in the closet, that what you are telling them is actually true and they can trust it and you haven't tried to hide anything. Off the back of that, they can then make a calculated valuation, a calculated offer, and they can then factor in what risk that will commit them to. Due diligence itself, it can take months and months, and if it's not well prepared, can frequently sour a deal. There is just some of the high level things is there, things like the governance, your credit score, your contracts, your security, whether that's IT or physical. And there's another big thing in there that's frequently forgotten, and that is the exit strategy, which is how are you going to hand over the business, especially if you are quite owner dependent. What arrangements have you made for other people to take on what you're actually doing? Brings me in mind of one of my favorite sayings by Michael Gerber of E-Myth Revisited, that systems run the business and people run the systems. That is a true asset. It does not say the owner runs the business or the owner is the business, because that's a job, not an asset. So when you're thinking about selling your business, you have to think about creating an asset that can be sold and then is income generating to the buyer. And it's really worth keeping that perspective in mind when you're either scaling or thinking about selling. We have seen, I said that it's take months. It's difficult to do a full due diligence in less than 12 months. If you're trying to cram it into, say, the 3 months while you've listed it with a broker and a buyer's coming on board, it's really difficult, and it just brings its own issues, which I will go into in a little bit more detail. This is basically about, are all your contracts in place? Are your strategic level documents, such as your cash flow forecast, your sales forecast, your growth plans, are they all in place, as well as all the detail around your assets, your liabilities? We've gone into more than one company where they don't even know how much tax they owe. Once we've got into their HMRC accounts for the due diligence, we had one person who went absolutely white when they discovered that the PAYE was off the charts. Just didn't know that they hadn't been paid for the last few months, and they were accruing daily fees. One might ask, how can a business owner get into that kind of situation? That to me comes back to that systems and processes. There wasn't proper delegation or accountability. There wasn't a process to follow up, and there wasn't the checks at the end. Again, slightly different topic, but this is the type of thing we come across with full due diligence. And if there are any stones that you have not turned over, a buyer will. They will get right into absolutely everything. And if something flags up as this isn't quite right, they will dig and dig and dig until they find the answer. So it's not something that should be taken lightly, this process. I talk about the curb appeal. This harks back to the sellability of a business. Obviously, you need to have a profitable business. You need to have a sellable business with the systems and the management, etc. But you also need to be able to prove those things. And that comes with a data room. It's the piece of work that proves that you've got all these things in place. So maybe you do have quite a nice, solid, sustainable business, but a buyer is still going to want the proof, not just your gut feel. So having that proof that your house is in order is going to be really, really important to them. Again, the valuation side, the EBIT side, we will or have gone into in other masterclasses, and we're going to reorganize another one for that, because that tends to be the one that most people are interested in initially, is the valuation. But the data room itself, again, if you think about when you're selling a house, if a house is looking really tidy and well presented, you are less likely to look as closely because you've got that feeling of confidence. And remembering, when you're selling anything, a lot of it is emotional. It's less logical, more emotional. So if you're able to give the buyer the confidence that they are buying something that you not only care about, but you really maintained well, they are less likely to disappear on you or try and find what you're hiding. It's that feeling of, are they hiding something? So it's really important when you're thinking about selling. However, I also talk about the fact that this should be potentially part of your strategic plan. It's not a pointless exercise. Even if you weren't to sell, it's not a pointless exercise, because it checks things like, is your revenue concentrated with just one client? Have you got that cash flow forecast and historical trends? Your employee contracts and your supplier contracts and your client contracts, are they all up to code? Would they withstand something that went wrong? It's all those things that, yes, a buyer would want to see it, but an owner of business actually should be keeping an eye on these things as well. So if you were to take your time and go through that due diligence process yourself and have it as a methodical plan throughout at least 12 months, you're going to start benefiting it yourself. You might be able to find cost savings. You might be able to see risks and opportunities when you go through that due diligence process for you as your business. So it can start to benefit your business really quickly just by going through that exercise. So we recommend that you have something like, so we've got this download which everyone can have access to at the end of this webinar. That we go through that as more of a strategic plan initially, to look through what are the risks to your business, what needs tightened up first, and then we can start the spring clean of keeping everything neat and tidy as we go. So that's definitely something that I recommend a lot of businesses think about, because they're so busy in doing the firefighting, talking to clients, etc., that they sometimes forget about the more strategic elements of how safe is my business, what is it exposed to, as well as the opportunities. And like I said before, the data room itself, it's just highly structured. So you will see in that list, if I put my mouse over here, I think you should be able to see that. There is an accounting section, there is a company governance section, there's an asset section. So it's set into different sections. And that's all the data room is. It's set into highly organized sections with a registry. The download that we are giving away for free, it's a high level, but it's still 60 points to go through. It's quite high level, and it's a really good starter of looking through the things that you should consider. When we actually work on a client directly, it's probably at least 3 times that size, and it's something that we've honed over several years working with individual buyers as well as sellers, and every time we come across something like, oh, never thought of that one, it gets slotted in. So we're constantly learning and refining it, but it's a chunky exercise. This one, however, although it's a lighter version, it's a really, really good starting point just to think about some of the basics that as a business owner you probably would want to anyway. So due diligence, how it can scupper a deal. The biggest thing about due diligence is the time that it takes. It's a massive amount of work, and I will honestly say that good due diligence will take at least 12 months prep because of the amount of work that you're going to go through. If you're already doing it as part of that tidy up process to keep your business as low a risk as possible, obviously it's all going to be ready. But if you're starting this from scratch, I really think it takes even a good business about 12 months. And offers or due diligence deadlines will expire on you. people just lose interest, they get fatigued, etc., which our next slide kind of talks about that a little bit. When you are dealing with a buyer in situ, as in you've already put your business up for sale and you've got that buyer sitting there tapping his fingers waiting to see, well, where's all the information? If it's not pre-prepared, we frequently find that employees start to get very nervous. They don't know what's happening. They haven't been prepared for all the barrage of questions that's going to come to them because the business owner needs their help. We frequently see client disruption, which can kill a business on its own if the clients are fully disrupted. And that can be the threat of, if it's an owner-dependent business and the clients are seeing that owner walk off, they're not prepared for that transition either. Same with suppliers. If they have a trusted business owner that's about to walk away, it can pull a contract. The most common one is banks. Banks, if you've got an overdraft facility and you suddenly change a director or an owner, that I have seen them just pull that overdraft facility and the working capital's just disappeared completely. And again, that's about preparing for the transition and understanding some of the risks that a sale of a business can bring to the business. The one that is probably the most underestimated is the seller fatigue. And I know, Craig, you've spoken about this because you've gone through this yourself, the seller fatigue, because it can go on for so long. And a lot of businesses are not prepared for that due diligence. It's exhausting. There are constant questions. Why this? Why that? Why can't I see this? Can you get me this report? And quite frankly, the business owner, they still have to run their business. If they're being taken up completely with the due diligence process, and maybe one or two of their key personnel is getting pulled into this process as well, which they should be if it's a decent sized business, part of the due diligence process. We have genuinely seen businesses tank because someone's taken their eye off the ball. And if you remember Construction Colin from a few slides ago, that was exactly what happened to him. He had no idea of what the due diligence process was going to land on his desk. And he really did take his eye off the ball. When that due diligence process closed, it was not a successful sale, but we stopped the due diligence process. His turnover had halved. And there were bills racking up, and he just felt he had to stop the process and go rescue his business. By which time he was already tired. He was already tired with the business because that's why he was wanting to sell. And then he was absolutely exhausted with the due diligence process. And it's this one thing that I'm trying to make business owners aware that this is avoidable. Come to the table prepared, knowing your numbers, knowing your systems and processes, knowing the buyers and the different types of buyers that you can approach or set the business up to sell to, which is a key component in a successful sale. The one other thing that can happen is the clawback clause. So there is, if a buyer has a good lawyer, there will be clawback clauses. So that if after the share purchase agreement has been signed and they discover something else from the last bit of due diligence they will usually give themselves 30 days to do that last bit of digging. And if they find anything that you have not disclosed, they can pull the valuation of the business down even further. I have seen some business owners walk away with a fraction of what was originally negotiated, thanks to due diligence and the clawback clause. So again, this is about protecting you as a business owner when you're starting to think about all of this. There are so many ways that you can protect yourself that is frequently not explained to a business owner. So timeline, excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of coffee here. So we've already said due diligence will normally take a minimum of 12 months. Really good due diligence that you are comfortable with will take 12 months. You're frequently only given 3 months, maybe 6 max, because a buyer is expecting a well-run business, and if it takes you more than 3 months to get them the information they've requested, they start having question marks. Valuation requires 3 years worth of books to build up. So if you have a particular valuation that you're trying to work towards, you're going to have 3 years worth of books minimum to prove that that business is worth that value. That's why I'm suggesting that if someone's thinking about selling their business, they take those 3 to 5 years to work out where I am right now, what's my current valuation, what do I want it to be, and here's a plan to get us here. And by the way, while we're doing it, we're going to check off all this due diligence. We're going to pull those levers to get us the valuation that we actually want. So for me, a comfortable timeline for a business owner to get their business prepared for selling is 3 to 5 years. And frequently when I'm talking to people, they say, oh yeah, I'll think about selling it in about 3 to 5 years. So it's like, okay, now is when you need to start looking at the infrastructure of your business and the financial clarity of your business. Like, start it now. Even if you don't sell in 3 to 5 years, at least you're going to get the benefit of it right now. You are going to be able to make better strategic decisions. So as I said in this slide, sale ready doesn't mean selling now. It just means you could, if you needed to or wanted to, which for me is really, really important for a business owner to be able to have that choice. I worked with a very prolific M&A acquisition expert who has acquired hundreds of businesses. And he always said the best time to sell a business is just before the best year, because pretty much shit happens. Legislation happens, tax changes, employment law, technological advancement can knock your services sideways. You just never know quite what's going to happen in the future. So, I mean, even health and lifestyle, you know, if you have a health issue or a member of your family has a health issue, you might want to step back. You might want to sell it. And you didn't plan for that issue to come along. I mean, life has a really good way of just always throwing you curveballs. So again, this is partly about improving the value of your business, but it's also, a lot of it is about protecting the business owner, potentially the employees, the business owner's family, getting in and about there and understanding, okay, I could step back if I wanted to, is really, really important. It's one of our goals to help business owners to be able to do that. We sometimes get the argument, oh, I don't want to step back, I enjoy work. Great, do that. But at least if you have the ability to step back if you want to, you're then going back to doing the things you love in the business. I worked with one business owner who, he just went back on the tools. That's what he loved doing. Another one went back to just selling to clients. He spent all his time just talking to clients. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to be stuck in the CEO's chair checking through cash flow forecast. They managed to set up their business in such a way that they then had their CEO or the MD or whatever doing what they didn't want to do to free them up to go and do the stuff that they love. So that's our goal for the business owners, is to have that freedom of choice. So a quick recap: give yourself plenty of time. I honestly recommend 3 to 5 years if you're serious about leveraging your business as an asset. Selling a business really is like selling a house, except you have far less protection. It's a bit of buyer beware, but it's also seller beware as well. You have to make sure that you are protecting your own interests in the way the business is set up, the way the business is sold, and the actual paperwork of that share purchase agreement, etc. it can be a minefield if you have never done it before. And as an awful lot of business owners, they've got one business, they're coming up to retirement, so they're only ever going to sell one business. So you don't expect them to know everything. They've never done it before. Why would they? So again, for us, protecting those business owners that have not done this before, they've got one shot at a big equity event for their retirement. We want to help them to get it right. We suggest working through this list methodically, and when I say that, it's by understanding where the weak spots are, fixing those first. Frequently the finances, but it might not be. But just start to implement this in kind of a methodical process, so that should you want or need to sell, it's nearly all there. There's just little tweaks that's needed, but you've already secured the business as best you can. Start collating the data room already. It's just a nice folder structure. There are industry standards and how some of these are done, but you know what, if a buyer can see that it's well structured, they're not going to mind too much how it's structured, as long as the information is there and everything is easily found and clearly labeled. And then keep it up to date with your strategic reviews. It can feed into the strategy of the business. Use it to the benefit of the business or yourself. Use it to identify your risks and opportunities. And then what we want to ask you all is, if I launch the poll, is what other topics would you like covered, and a chance to ask any questions. If you would like to join me for some live Q&A on what does exit ready entail, how to protect the value in your business, and what is a buyer's perspective, we're running a few live masterclasses under the Sale or Scale series. I shall put the link below in the description or the comments, and we would love to see you there sometime.